So I'm going to talk about verification of retroreflectivity, specifically pavement marking retroreflectivity. If you're familiar with retroreflectivity, it's used in the fields with signing and other traffic control devices, but this topic is specifically going to be about pavement markings. Just a real quick slide on what retroreflectivity is if you're not that familiar. It's basically the efficiency of a material to return light back toward the light source. So if you think about it, if you're sitting in your vehicle at night, you're driving down the road and you see the pavement markings with high retroreflectivity are going to look brighter than markings with low retroreflectivity. Retroreflectivity is the general term used. The more appropriate term is the coefficient of retroreflected luminance, but that's a lot more difficult to say than just retroreflectivity. So retroreflectivity is the term that everybody uses when they're talking about coefficient of retroreflected luminance. For pavement markings, the short designation used for it's R sub L. If you're familiar with signs, it's R sub A. And then the units are in millicandelas per meter squared per lux. So that's an area of light returned per amount of light that's falling on the object. So how do you determine retroreflectivity? Well, you use a retroreflectometer. So this is the equipment that we have here at TTI. We have our new vehicle that we just recently acquired this summer. It's got some of the newest equipment out there. This here is the mobile retroreflectometer. It's mounted on the outside of the vehicle. It collects data at highway speeds. And it continually monitors the pavement marking as you drive down them. This is our older vehicle. It's the most common mobile system on the market right now. There's quite a few of these in Texas. And then these two instruments here are the handheld portable retroreflectometers. TxDOT, several districts have several of these devices. This is probably the most common unit right here. The construction division, they also have some. They're going to be working with us on this project. So why is verification of retroreflectivity of interest? Why are we starting this project? I should do a little more background on this project. We just started this verification of retroreflectivity project this past year. We're not quite a year into the project yet. But mobile retroreflectivity and retroreflectivity evaluations have been going on in Texas for over 10 years now, and I'll talk a little bit more about the background of that in just a minute. So what are the TxDOT areas of interest? Well, item 666 is the reflectorized pavement marking item in the standard sheets and the standard specs. That was recently just updated to incorporate all the different specifications that were used for pavement markings. It included the profile pavement markings and then pavement markings that had retroreflectivity specifications requirements on them. Some districts were using them in the past, not all districts were, so this new item 666 will be more familiar to some districts than others. The ones that weren't using retroreflectivity requirements in the past, well, they're going to be using them now because of a recent memorandum in January of this year that went out to make things even around the whole state so that all districts were using the same requirements that the pavement marking retroreflectivity was going to be required on all new pavement marking installations, whether it be construction or maintenance. That's all markings except for the profiled pavement markings. They do not have the retroreflectivity requirements. So in item 666, there's a couple different areas in it that address the mobile pavement marking retroreflectivity. Area 4.4 talks about the retroreflectivity requirements themselves. Item 666 requires white pavement markings to be 275 millicandelas per meter squared per lux and 175 for yellow. There are some other specifications that have been used in the past that have higher retroreflectivity requirements, which those can still fall into to have the retroreflectivity verified by this project that we're working on. Item 4.5 in that specification talks about the retroreflectivity measurements themselves. 4.5.1 talks about the mobile retroreflectometer measurements. It specifically states that they're required for any project that has more than 200,000 linear feet of pavement markings on that project. For projects that are smaller, the mobile's not required, but it can be used by the contractor if they so choose. Area 4.5.2 talks about the portable retroreflectometers and how they're supposed to be used, and it says that for every mile of the project, 20 handheld pavement marking retroreflectivity readings need to be taken along the length of that project. So obviously on your higher volume roadways, if you have smaller projects, getting out there with a handheld retroreflectometer may not be the easiest thing in the world to do. So even on some of the smaller projects, the mobile retroreflectometers may be used. And I talked about the memorandum that's requiring pavement marking retroreflectivity on the installation of new markings, and then the TxDOT special specification that governs the mobile retroreflectivity data collection for pavement markings. I don't have a special specification number up there right now because it's currently being revised. We're incorporating this retroreflectivity verification program into that specification. So this slide is just going to talk about what's actually in that specification and what we're adding to it. So the specification, it states that the contractors are required to be certified by TTI. I'll talk about the certification process over the next couple slides. The specification also describes what the contractors are supposed to do when they're doing their mobile retroreflectivity data collection. It talks about the data that they're supposed to collect, how it's supposed to be submitted, how the data is supposed to be mapped. One of the neat features with this mobile retroreflectivity is that it has GPS coordinates associated with the data that's collected. That information can be ported over to a Google Maps or any other mapping program and plot a chart based on the retroreflectivity values that were collected and map those retroreflectivity levels right on the road and associate various colors with the different levels of retroreflectivity. Typically, we've used 3 different color levels in the past. Green indicates a good pavement marking that's meeting requirements. Yellow would be a marking that's around requirements, and then red would be one that's completely failed and not meeting the requirements that are necessary. The specification also talks about video that the data collection teams can collect while they're out there, and then field spot checks. So the field spot checks are using handheld retroreflectometers to collect data to help verify the accuracy of the mobile retroreflectometers. And the area we're adding into the specification right now are the retroreflectivity verification requirements. That's where TTI is helping TxDOT to monitor the contractor's work. So a little background on the mobile retroreflectometer certification program. It started in the spring of 2007, so we're getting close to 10 years of work studying these mobile retroreflectometers and how the contractors use them here in Texas. The program was in response to some issues TxDOT had with some of these early mobile retroreflectivity data collection that the contractors were doing. The validity of the data collected was questioned. It was highly variable. Some of the numbers didn't really make sense. There were values that were outside of what you would typically expect for pavement markings, and there was just a little disappointment in the data that was collected, and TxDOT wanted to have a program in place to monitor the ability of these contractors to collect accurate data. Collecting retroreflectivity data with a handheld retroreflectometer is fairly simple. It's a simple calibration process. Then you just place the retroreflectometer on the pavement marking and take a measurement. The mobile readings are a lot more complicated. You're dealing with a dynamic situation. You have a mobile platform where the vehicle's bouncing up and down. The equipment has a lot more factors that can impact its ability to collect accurate information. The calibration procedure is a lot more complicated. So monitoring the contractors to make sure they have the ability to collect accurate data right from the start is where the certification program came in. So prior to conducting work for TxDOT, the contractors must come to TTI and pass a certification test. It's also required now for all new operators of the equipment. We use the Riverside campus in Bryan. We have a closed course area on the runways out there where we have a whole bunch of different pavement markings. We also use some of the TxDOT roads around the facility. We have white and yellow markings, solid lines, broken lines, double lines, all the different pavement marking configurations. Now with this new field verification program, the certification program in the past was an annual evaluation to make sure people's equipment was still working and that they were collecting accurate data. The field verification program is going to go into field checks of these contractors. We're going to be monitoring the contractors in the field, and that will be the new basis for maintained certification. So if people are not collecting accurate data in the field, they will lose their certification and have to go back through the full certification program. We also have a certification guide that we distribute to the contractors that talks about the whole certification program, and it has all of the retroreflectivity verification information in it as well. Here's a picture of our certification test area. It's a long runway out at the Riverside campus. It's about a half-mile long section of stripes that we have out there. And like I mentioned, we have various configurations. We have all the different types of pavement markings that are typically used here in Texas: waterborne paint, preformed tapes, thermoplastics, and epoxy markings. Some of our markings on this closed course also have the retroreflective raised pavement markers, which is another factor that influences the accuracy of the mobile data that doesn't really impact handheld readings. So we wanted to incorporate them onto this course to make sure the contractors were effectively removing the reflective marker data from the mobile data that they're collecting. So the certification testing, what do the contractors have to do when they come here? Typically in the field, the contractors are going to collect yellow pavement marking retroreflectivity values off the left side of their vehicle. They're driving in the lanes like they normally should, so they're not going to have the unit mounted on the right side of the vehicle while they're collecting yellow lines. Typically, it'll be mounted on the right-hand side when they're doing white markings. So that's what we hold them to when we're doing the certification. Even though we have a closed course area where they could monitor both off of either side of the vehicle, we want them collecting the data like they would in the field. What kind of accuracy are we looking for? We've been using plus or minus 15%. What are we comparing that to? Well, we're comparing the mobile that they collect to handheld data that we collect. The handheld is kind of the standard. It's the easier retroreflectivity value to collect. It's the most common form of retroreflectivity across the DOTs and in research and whatnot. So we're using the handheld as a standard. One of the things we also test when we're doing the certification program is we actually evaluate the accuracy of the contractor's handheld retroreflectometers as well. We started that a few years ago when we ran into some issues where different contractors and actually even pavement marking manufacturers had handhelds that weren't properly calibrated and needed to be serviced. So we started monitoring those handheld retroreflectometers as well, because if you're using a piece of equipment that's not operating properly to calibrate your mobile retroreflectometer, well then your mobile retroreflectometer will not be able to collect accurate information. So this is a chart showing the number of contractors we have certified over the years since we started in 2007. So in 2007, we had 4 different contractors. When the program first started, there was about 2 contractors in Texas that were collecting this mobile retroreflectivity data. At about that same time, the San Antonio district started a performance-based pavement marking maintenance program. So a contractor down in San Antonio purchased a retroreflectometer as part of that project that they were doing, and so they had to be certified as well. And over the years, we've steadily increased the number of contractors that have been certified as more work has been done by TxDOT that had retroreflectivity requirements. You can see from 2014 to 2015, there was a pretty good jump. We've added 3 new retroreflectivity contractors this year. That's mostly due to the new mandate by TxDOT that all new pavement marking striping has to have has to have retroreflectivity requirements. So a lot of these contractors that are doing the larger jobs want to be able to collect this mobile retroreflectivity data. So we've like I mentioned, we've certified 3 new contractors this year. 2 of them have the newer unit that we just recently acquired as well. Of the certified contractors, 11 are Texas contractors, and 3 are from out of state. Texas by far does the most mobile pavement marking retroreflectivity data collection, has the most contractors, has the most equipment. So TxDOT's way ahead of everybody else, even though some other states are starting to do a lot more. Florida has a lot of mobile retroreflectivity data collection. Several other states have programs in place as well. Over the years, we've evaluated 3 different mobile retroreflectivity measurement devices that have been certified. My picture earlier, we had 2. The 3rd one that we've evaluated is a proprietary piece of equipment that's only used by 1 contractor, and it actually had pretty good results. And currently, there are several other measurement devices in development. We're working with a couple different manufacturers and testing their products to make sure that they're collecting accurate data. So the retroreflectivity verification testing, what is it? Why are we doing it? So federal regulations require DOTs to verify contractor test results for performance-based product acceptance. So now with the requirements to meet certain retroreflectivity levels on the pavement markings, TxDOT can't accept the work unless those performance values are met. So to make sure the contractors are turning in acceptable data, the federal regulations require that the contractors are monitored to make sure that the data that they're submitting is accurate. The guideline is to perform verification on a minimum of 10% of projects. So we're working with TxDOT to meet these requirements. Does this mean the different districts don't need to do any monitoring? No, I just had a question a couple weeks ago from a district, and they said, okay, you guys are starting this verification testing. Does that mean I don't need to be out on the roads checking our projects anymore? And I said, well, we're not going to be covering 100% of projects. I don't know if TxDOT needs to cover 100% themselves, but it may be a good idea if there are certain areas where you think there may be issues or whatnot, that the individual districts go out and collect data to help verify that the contractors are collecting accurate data. We're really more of a supplement to what each individual district will be doing. So how are we determining what projects we're going to do, where we're going to do our data collection? We're using a site manager materials report to monitor and select projects. We're working with the construction division on this. Darren Hazlitt, Johnny Miller, I see John Bassett standing in the back. We're working with all those guys to kind of figure out which projects we need to be monitoring. So we have a spreadsheet set up in Site Manager that we can go to and update as new contracts are put out. And then we select a portion of those and add them into our pool of data of projects that we're going to verify. So we're using a stratified random sample, so it's not purely random. There are some categories that we're trying to make sure we have as far as to make sure we're evaluating all of the different contractors that we have, and that we go to different areas of the states where they may be using different pavement marking materials or have different road surfaces. So initially, we're going to select about 20% of the projects that we're viewing in Site Manager. Our goal is to evaluate about 15%. So that gives us about 5% of projects that maybe they don't go all the way through, or just weather conditions or something impact our ability to go monitor them. Because the goal is to monitor 10% of the projects. So what are we going to do? So we're going to get our mobile retroreflectivity data. TTI is going to go out and collect mobile retroreflectivity data, and then we're going to collect the data that the contractors took. We're going to request them to send us the information that they have that they're submitting to TxDOT. So we're going to compare those two things. So when TTI is out there, we want to make sure the mobile data we're collecting is going to be accurate. So we're going to use our handheld retroreflectometers and take frequent spot readings to make sure our mobile data is correct and accurate. And our data will be collected within a week of the contractor data to make sure that there's not any influences of time, traffic. Obviously, on higher ADT roadways, the retroreflectivity may be influenced more if the readings are taken at a further apart time. We don't want weather to be an issue. If the contractors, read 7 days before us, and then we come in after there's been some significant rain or other kind of influences. So we're going to be monitoring all of that stuff when we do the data collection. One of the hang-ups with this special specification right now is how is TTI going to be informed of when the contractors are doing the data collection? As I mentioned, we want to be out there within pretty close proximity to the time when the contractors are doing the data collection so that we're comparing apples and apples. So we brought kind of our recommended things to the Association of General Contractors, and there's oh, that's too much work for the contractors. It's understandable, but we need to do certain things to be able to make sure that we're out there at the same time as the contractors. So maybe right now we're looking at the contractors and possibly some form of TxDOT as well, making sure that TTI is informed of when the contractors are going to be out there doing the mobile retroreflectivity data collection. The goal is to have this be a blind evaluation. The contractors won't know which jobs we're going to be monitoring. We don't want them to, do their best work on only the projects that we're going to be evaluating. So we're looking at right now having the contractors contact TTI every time they're going out to do mobile retroreflectivity data collection, or contact us ahead of time when they have these data collections scheduled, and then we'll be able to schedule the specific projects that we want to evaluate. So the data analysis, we're going to be looking at two things. One of them is the accuracy of the data. Does it fall within plus or minus 15% of the data that we're collecting? Right now we're using the plus or minus 15%. That's what we've been using on the certification program. We may modify that value as we collect more information. As I said, we just started this project. We've only done a few field checks right now. So as we collect more data and see what kind of ranges we're getting in the field, we may modify if plus or minus 15% is appropriate or not. And another thing we're going to be looking at as well is, does the contractor and/or TTI data meet the retroreflectivity requirements? If the data verifies, then generally it's going to be pretty good, if whether it meets the requirements or not. But the issue comes up when the data doesn't verify, and we say the marking it doesn't meet the requirements, but the contractor says it does. That's where we'll have some issues, and I think I'll talk about that in one slide. We're going to be collecting enough data so that the variability in the measurements will be accounted for in the analysis that we do. So notification of results. After we collect our data, we'll provide the results to the TxDOT engineer in charge of the project as well as the contractor. When we inform the contractor, we'll be letting them know of issues that we may have seen in the data that they collected. We've been doing it for a long time, so just looking at data that's been collected, you can kind of see where the contractor may have had some issues with the settings on their equipment, or some other areas where they could improve their data collection to collect more accurate data. So really the possible results are the data verifies and it's above the required the requirements, which is a good thing. The data could be could verify but be below the requirements. That would mean you'd probably have to restripe the roadway if that's what the engineer chooses to do. The data verifies but is above and below requirements. That's where one of the issues may arise, and possibly need a referee test. The referee testing is going to be conducted by the construction division. And then when the data doesn't verify is when we have some more issues. So if the data doesn't verify but it's above requirements, well, at least they met the requirements, but the data that they're collecting is not good. So how reliable, will that data be in the future? How reliable will that contractor be in the future? That's where some corrective actions may need to take place to improve their data collection in the future. When the data doesn't verify and it's below requirements, there'll need to be some corrective actions by the contractor and possibly restriping the roadway. And then really the biggest area where we see where there may be issues is when the data doesn't verify, and either the contractor or TTI says it's above requirements and the other says it's below requirements. And that's where I think the majority of this referee testing will come in, and corrective actions will also be needed. I'll talk about the corrective actions and the referee testing on these next two slides. So the corrective actions need to take place, or certification status can be lost after multiple failed verification tests. As I mentioned, the certification before was an annual thing here at TTI. This new certification, it's going to be based on the field data collection. So if the contractors collect data that's not accurate repeatedly, they will lose their certification and have to go through the full recertification process to regain certification. So we'll provide them with corrective actions they need to take, and if those are not taken, and we monitor them again and the data is poor, then they will lose their certification. I have a few possible corrective actions listed there. There are several more. Really making sure their equipment is operating properly, improved calibration procedure and frequency. Every time they come down for certification here, I see that contractors have modified what they're doing, usually for the better, but I always provide them with some best practices to further improve the data that they're collecting. And really the software settings is a major issue. The manufacturers of the equipment regularly update their software and whatnot, and when they make changes, the contractors need to be able to account for those changes. So the referee testing. The engineer can choose to use either the contractor or the TTI data to determine if the marking meets the retroreflectivity requirements. If needed, the engineer can request referee testing. Also, the contractor can request referee testing if they think their data was good and that their markings are meeting the requirements, but we say it's not. They can contact the appropriate people at the construction division and request the referee testing. The referee testing will be performed using handheld retroreflectometers. It will be on a subset of the area that's in question. And that's what I think John Bassett will be one of the main guys leading up that referee testing once we get to that portion of this project. So the next steps, we need to get final approval on the revised special specification. Once that occurs, I think we're going to be sending out some information to the districts and the contractors to let them know about the revised special specification and the retroreflectivity verification requirements that are now going to be taking place. I'm going to distribute the revised certification program guide to the contractors. Right now it's pretty much done and ready to go out. We're just waiting for approval of the new special specification. And then once that's all done, we'll implement the full-scale retroreflectivity verification program. Right now we're doing it on a small scale. I think we hit right around 10% actually this past year, so we're not too far off, but we still haven't got it to the full-scale testing yet, where it's blind testing and the involvement of TxDOT and the actual reporting to the contractors and to the DOT. If needed, TTI can work with the districts to help them, if they have questions about the mobile retroreflectivity, any of the requirements of item 666 or the new special specification. We can set up some training sessions or just assist you with, interpreting what the mobile retroreflectivity data says. I've had a lot of questions in the past on, why does this file look like this and this file looks different. I can certainly help out. I've been doing it for a really long time, and some of the districts that weren't using the retroreflectivity requirements in the past, this is going to be something new for them. We're also developing a website that's going to talk about the certification and verification. We're going to populate it with the certified contractors so that the TxDOT can go right to the website and and find out if the contractor that's working on their job is actually certified or not. In the past, I've mostly gotten emails or calls from different districts when they've been doing this to determine if the contractor's certified. In the future, just be able to go to our website. So that's all I have, for this presentation. If I present again in a couple of years, I can maybe give you an update on the status of the program then. But right now, we don't have a lot of data to present, just kind of more of information on, what this program is and what to expect in the future. All my contact information's there. If you have questions that you don't want to ask here, feel free to call or email me. And then our website that we're developing is listed on the bottom of the screen, so you'll be able to go there to get more information.